What's going on, y'all? Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Cast. Thank you for checking us out. This week, we're going to talk about the election, obviously, and the cloud of suspected fraud surrounding it. Folks, I know it looks bad, but it's not over yet. There are court cases to be decided. They declared Al Gore the winner, and 37 days later, that turned out to not be the case. So don't give up hope. It's not over. So we'll get into that. We'll get into Oregon legalizing hard drugs and racism brought to light in this election, and it's not what you'd expect. Or maybe you would, I don't know. But we'll get into all of that and more straight ahead. Thanks for tuning in, folks. If you're listening, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you prefer to watch, go to rumble.com/thelibertycast and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Not a whole lot went on this week since we were last together, did there? Obviously. Obviously, I'm kidding, so let's hit it. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Despite what's going on with the election, and even though it doesn't look good at the moment, the fight isn't over, but we'll get into that a little later on in the show. First, I want to talk about our rights, which transcend any election or any terrible candidate, president-elect or president. Now, one of the reasons that people are railing against the tech tyrants is that Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, social media in general have become the de facto public square. Now, all of this started off as a noble effort to prevent terrorists from using the platforms to recruit, prevent people from distributing illicit materials using their platforms. And these are laudable goals, but it never ends there. When leftists are involved and start off with something reasonable, mission creep inevitably follows. Conservatives would never consider censoring speech in the public square unless you're threatening someone or inciting violence against someone or a group of people. Yet, here we are. Twitter routinely censors people under the premise that they are protecting us from false information. Like we need them to filter all that out for us, like we're children and they're our parents. And we're all familiar with Facebook and their fact checkers. But what does this have to do with the Second Amendment, you ask? Well, Instagram has gotten in on the censorship fund by suppressing firearm-related posts. Some popular pages are getting messages that their followers hadn't seen them in months, and they thought they were off the platform. My wife, owner of Carry Girl Gear, has seen her reach dramatically reduced on Instagram. So go ahead and give her a follow on Instagram at Carry Girl Gear, and check out her gear at carrygirlgear.com. Now, while guns and shooting are a big part of her brand, it's primarily a clothing company. And this is happening to a number of businesses across the platforms. So now they've hidden certain hashtags like abolish the ATF, but abolish the police and abolish ICE have hundreds of thousands of posts. If this doesn't bother you, you might be a leftist. But if you're someone who values liberty, this should be especially troubling. Within the Treasury Department, there is a bureau called the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN for short. And their mission is to compile information on financial transactions to fight things like money laundering, terrorism financing, and other financial crimes. This bureau shares their information with other law enforcement agencies, such as the ATF. And as of now, FinCEN flags any money transfers beginning or ending in the United States in the amount of $3,000 or more. But they want to reduce that threshold to $250. Why? Who finances terrorism or launders money $250 at a time? Why is this important? What does this have to do with people like you and I? Well, as I mentioned, FinCEN shares information with other federal law enforcement agencies like the ATF. Reducing this threshold to $250 would allow the ATF to track people who purchase gun parts from overseas. And this is concerning because it provides the government with the apparatus by which they can circumvent record-keeping limitations by allowing the use of forensic accounting methods to determine firearms and accessories ownership. Once they have that list, then they can start the confiscation process. Now, can you believe someone actually said to me this week that no one has ever said that they plan to confiscate our guns?
So to gun owners out there who say, well, a Biden administration means they're going to come for my guns.
Bingo.
I do believe that we need to do buybacks, and I'll tell you why. First of all, let's be clear about what assault weapons are. They have been designed to kill a lot of human beings quickly. They are weapons of war with no place on the streets of a civil society.
I want to make something clear. I'm going to guarantee you this is not last year's scene of this guy. You're going to take care of the gun problem with me. You're going to be the one that leads this effort. I'm counting on you.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47.
I'll get into that later on in the show, but leftism truly is a mental disorder. A Cabelas store in Cheetoga, New York is being sued for selling ammunition to an, at the time, 19-year-old by the name of Jake Klosek. That ammunition was used in a handgun that Klosek used to accidentally kill 19-year-old Anthony King, who was a friend of his that he had as a guest while he was house sitting for another family. Now, the suit brought by King's family alleges that Cabelas knew or should have known its failure to use reasonable care in selling ammunition to someone like Klosek would result in serious injury or death. The only leg this suit has to stand on is that at 19 years old, Klosek should not have been able to buy handgun ammunition. The only problem with that is that he bought 45 ACP, which can also be used in rifles. So Cabelas' motion asking for a dismissal was rejected because the ammunition was marketed as handgun ammunition. And in New York, under the SAFE Act, rifles that use 45 ACP are not legal. Now, it's for cases like this that the PLCAA was put in place. Klosek was clearly negligent. That's not in question. And he's serving time for that. And if the family he was house sitting for left their gun safe open, which is alleged in court documents, then that seems like a pretty clear-cut case of negligence as well. But I can't see how Cabelas can be held legally responsible for this tragedy. If it weren't for the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, though, they could be. And if Joe Biden were to win and Georgia doesn't work out in our favor, the PLCAA will end up a thing of the past. And we'll have more on that later as well. But there is one silver lining around this disappointing election, and it's despite that all the money that Bloomberg and his gun-grabbing organizations, Every Town for Gun Safety, and Moms Demand Box Wine, for all the money they spent, which is in excess of $100 million, I believe, trying to flip Texas blue, and all the anti-gun California residents moving to Texas, and all the kids who come to UT and other schools here in Texas who never leave, Texas is still red. Now, I admit I was concerned that given all the money that they spent and how the strategy worked in Virginia, that it could work here. But it turns out that Texans love our freedom, we love our low taxes, and our guns. And no matter how much money you spend to try and convince people to give up their rights, at least here in Texas, it turns out that that's going to be money wasted. Now, I did not lead off the show with election stuff because regardless of the outcome, there are still other things that we need to be concerned with. Now, when I first started preparing for the show, it looked like the Senate was safe. But since John James was cheated and Martha McSally lost to gun grabber Mark Kelly, and that still is up in the air too. But now Georgia appears to be headed towards a runoff, and the Senate is still a question mark. So the unmitigated disaster is still, unfortunately, a possibility. But the big question right now is, was there fraud going on? The left would have us believe that because the president told everyone to vote in person, and the people who voted against him mailed theirs in, and since those votes were counted last in many states, that is what accounts for the massive swing overnight after the polls closed. It sounds semi-plausible, and I could be persuaded that is the case, but of all those ballots that closed the gap overnight, not a single vote came in for President Trump. 100% of those overnight votes came in for Biden. That is statistically improbable and pretty much impossible. And the thing is, they might have been able to persuade some people if history had shown a more balanced outcome in these situations. But these things never, ever turn out in favor of Republicans. Whenever ballots appear magically days later, it's always Democrat votes with no Republican votes mixed in whatsoever. And if there are, there are so few as to make it statistically irrelevant. Show me a time when ballots were discovered after the fact and they were Republican votes. I'll wait. And what about the software that glitched and caused the votes to be tabulated incorrectly?
If all this wasn't enough, in Antrim County, ballots were counted for Democrats that were meant for Republicans, causing a 6,000 vote swing against our candidates. The county clerk came forward and said tabulating software glitched and caused a miscalculation of the votes. Since then, we have now discovered that 47 counties use this same software in the same capacity. Antrim County had to hand count all of the ballots, and these counties that use this software need to closely examine their results for similar discrepancies. The people of Michigan deserve a transparent and open process.
47 counties in Michigan and 30 states use this software as well. The software made by Dominion Voting Systems has been known for some time to be defective, yet 30 states use it. And even with the glitchy software, you'd expect errors to favor both candidates. Yet the errors are all going in one direction. How can this be allowed to stand? And yes, I know that in states like Iowa and Kansas and Montana, the president took the lead with a vertical surge like Biden did in Michigan and Wisconsin. But there's a huge difference. In those states, Biden also had a vertical jump. It just wasn't as steep as Trump's in those situations, which is what you would expect from a statistical perspective. You would expect that in a fair vote count. There's no way that a batch of votes came in from a single county and it goes 100% for one candidate. There may be that rare exception where the county or the city or whatever is very small, homogeneous, and everyone is either related or works in the same company or industry or has several threads of commonality. But again, that would have to be a very small jurisdiction, and even then, I have my doubts. So for them to state emphatically that these vote surges are not fraud, and it just doesn't pass the smell test for me. And it shouldn't for anyone who isn't suffering from level 7 Trump derangement syndrome. And I'm also waiting for Republicans to step up and call out this nonsense. Aside from Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz, and I think Tim Scott, where are the Republicans? I'll tell you where they are. They're hedging their bets. They think that with the possibility of a Biden presidency, they want to try and keep a relationship with him by not coming out and saying that the Democrats cheated. Screw that. Screw that. The left spent the past 4 years saying that Trump was an illegitimate president. The least the Republicans could do is stand up and make sure that this is a fair election. They should be making as big a scene as the Democrats did And they shouldn't let up until 2024. The same way the left hasn't let up. The left used this pandemic as a way to sow chaos and confusion in the voting process. Make no mistake. Before the Chinese coronavirus hit, President Trump was going to win a landslide against whichever sacrificial lamb the left put up. And once the pandemic hit, though, and they realized they could use it to their advantage, they used it to its maximum effectiveness. They played up its lethality and made everyone afraid to leave their homes. They shut down businesses and then didn't do anything to try and compensate people for their losses. Now, I'm not a government handout guy, but when you make it so that people who want to earn a living and or run a business but can't, you have to do something. And Pelosi and the gang effectively shifted that blame onto Trump. And of course, everyone who pays attention only during the month of October in an election season bought it. But they still have to resort to cheating to complete the circuit. And the universal mail-in ballots was the vehicle that they used to complete it. When you send out ballots to everyone, including dead people and their pets, the refusal to acknowledge even the possibility of voter fraud and election fraud is astonishing to me. And when I bring that up, leftists either gloss over it or dismiss it out of hand as a conspiracy theory with no merit whatsoever. And then we saw them covering up windows at vote counting locations and poll watchers being kept too far away to see the ballots, let alone inspect or challenge them. But all of that was supposed to be a conspiracy theory as well.
When you say that there's no evidence, the people standing behind me are called witnesses. They will eventually, soon hopefully, appear in court and give this testimony, because we're going to file a federal lawsuit that will cover here and Pittsburgh, and we will have as many witnesses as the court needs. Right now it could be as many as 90 witnesses. That's called evidence that there was a uniform deprivation of the right to inspect, which constitutes a fraud on the people of Pennsylvania, constitutes a fraud on all legitimate voters. Well, they made it impossible to view those ballots. And there can be only one conclusion as to why you would make it so impossible. Because many, many of them were fraudulent. And you just don't lose leads like that without corruption.
The only reason for people to suggest that there is no evidence of fraud is willful ignorance. If you think that the scale is too broad for some of these instances to make a significant impact on vote counts, I disagree, but that's at least a reasonable position to take. At least that's acknowledging that there is a possibility that voter fraud exists. But some of these leftists can't even do that. And it's so frustrating when it's obvious. It's obvious to those that are paying attention. Okay, so now that we've gone through the doom and gloom and how the election is being stolen from us, what can we do? Well, some of the obvious things we've talked about before. Call your senators and your congresspeople and express your frustration and tell them that the laws surrounding these elections need to change. Tell them that universal mail-in ballots cannot be how we conduct elections going forward. Tell them that this chaos is not good for the country, and it's not good for our standing in the world. Other countries are looking at this, and some like China are licking their chops. And not just because their puppet is close to sitting in the Oval Office, but they're looking for any weakness to exploit, Joe and Hunter Biden notwithstanding. And also get involved in other ways. Find some conservative groups to associate with and get involved at the local level. I'm looking for some groups myself, because this microphone isn't enough. You have to get involved. And if you're already involved, get more involved, because a Harris administration is going to do everything they can to chip away and strip away your rights. So we have to, A, make it as difficult as we can for her to do that, and B, make sure that she can only do damage until 2024. I decided that going forward, I'm going to try and dedicate a segment of the show to law enforcement. The heroes that put on a blue uniform, pin a badge on their chest, strap on a sidearm, and do their best to protect us from the evil in this world. Now, with all the craziness surrounding the election, a lot of stuff has fallen by the wayside. I mean, when was the last time you heard anything about the Chinese coronavirus on the news? It is still a thing, though, because my dad was just tested positive. I'm not sure about my mom yet, but either way, I know they're both going to be fine. But still, no one is talking about it. And I think that was by design. Did you see the Biden-Harris victory party? Not a mask to be seen anywhere, and no social distancing. I think the Chinese coronavirus pandemic about to be over, especially if Biden is successful in court. But that's a discussion for another time. Right now, I want to talk about the body cam footage that was released by the Philadelphia Police Department in the Walter Wallace Jr. shooting. It still looks like a good shoot to me. We talked about the Tuller drill last week and the 21-foot threshold for that drill. And based on the video, he was barely the length of a Ford Edge away from at least one of the officers. Well within the threshold of being a threat. And you could see him feign like he was going to make a move towards one of them. So I think it was only a matter of time before he actually did. I think he was a threat, and they did what they had to do to stop the threat. And let's dispense with the whole cops are racist thing, because if those cops were racist, they were given ample provocation by the bystanders to go full racist and start locking people up for assault, beating them, the whole thing. Those bystanders prevented them from giving Wallace CPR or implementing other life-saving techniques. Mangum, Louisiana police officer and EMT Marshall Waters Jr., age 49, was shot during a traffic stop on October 17th of this year, but succumbed to his injuries on November 5th. The scumbag who shot him was driving a stolen vehicle used to flee a robbery earlier that day. He shot Officer Waters as he exited his patrol vehicle, and the bullet hit him below his vest. Officer Waters underwent emergency surgery that day, and 3 more during his stay in the intensive care unit. But sadly, as I said, on November 5th, he passed away. The scumbag who shot him was apprehended the day of the shooting and booked for robbery, theft of a motor vehicle, and attempted first-degree murder of a police officer. Those charges are sure to be amended now to first-degree murder of a police officer. Now, we keep hearing the mantra from Black Lives Matter, say his name, say her name. I know they're not going to say Marshall Waters' name, but we should. We should say his name, and we should remember it. Rest easy, Officer Waters. A hero remembered never dies. On a much happier note, Officer Carlos Martinez, out of Hobbs, New Mexico, got called to a home where he ended up helping a mother and father deliver their baby. When he arrived on the scene, she was in labor, and he realized that there was no time to get her to the hospital, so he helped deliver her baby in the backseat of the SUV in the couple's driveway. I'm happy to report that mother and son got a full checkup and are doing well. Thank you, Officer Martinez, for your dedication. You, sir, are a credit to the badge. I've said before, and it bears repeating, especially now, that conservatives need to take some lessons from the left. The left knows how to deliver a message and marshal their forces to get that message across and achieve their goals. Imagine what conservatives could do if we use some of their methods to advance our ideas, which are actually good and have been shown to work. There's a great article in the American Conservative by David Hines where he dives into this, and one of the things that he points out is that conservatives' theory of power is wrong. And when I first read that, I didn't think I was going to agree. I thought that was kind of crazy. But I was only thinking about the end result and what conservatives and leftists want to do with power when they have it. But he's talking about, in this piece, how to gain power. Conservatives have been quite passive over the past generation and a half. They've been bent on taking the high road and following Robert's Rules of Order and whatnot. I said we need to throw that out. But Hines puts, he fleshes that out quite nicely. He points out that conservatives have relied on state power to effect change. Come up with great ideas, debate them, inspire voters, and win on the merits. Leftists have been doing it a completely different way. They train people to create pressure that generates compliance with their demands. Leftists understand behavior. They know that if they want to bend someone to their will, they have to make sure that there's pain associated with not complying with their demands. And Hines refers to this in his article as actual material loss. And for politicians, that means votes. That's why guys like Richard Blumenthal are still in office, because the embarrassment of being found out didn't cost them any votes. Another example he uses in the piece, he says pro-life advocates are actually able to generate crowds and momentum more than other conservative groups, except for maybe the Second Amendment advocates. But when Democrats had the White House and both houses of Congress, they made it a federal felony to peacefully protest at abortion clinics. That is an example of actual material loss. So how do we fight on their level? And I don't mean the dirty tactics and cheating. I think that if we fight effectively, our superior ideas will win, and win consistently. And I touched on it earlier in the show, but we have to get involved. We have to find like-minded groups locally and join and get involved. And once we find a group or create one, then we have to network with other groups, other like-minded groups. And we have to keep in mind that we're not going to affect national change between now and the next presidential election. Okay, I won't say never, but it's not likely to happen. I suppose it could if every conservative came to the same realization and acted on it, but again, not very likely. So start local, and spread. Build the infrastructure that supports affecting change on a county level, and then on a statewide level, and then a national level. But that's not going to happen overnight. And it's going to take time and effort and even some sacrifice. Now, I'm simplifying this piece in the interest of time, but it's going to be in the show notes, so I encourage you all to check it out. It's well worth the read. There's a ton of good stuff in there. Oregon became the first state in the union to decriminalize the possession of hard drugs, including heroin, cocaine, LSD, and the legalized therapeutic use of psychedelic mushrooms. Now, I know that there are research studies touting the therapeutic benefits of psilocybin for certain mental illnesses. And my knowledge is limited, and I didn't do a ton of research after the measure passed, so I'll just leave that there. But Oregon's measure is called the Drug Addiction Treatment and Recovery Act, and its goal is to transition Oregon's drug policy from a punitive criminal approach to a humane, cost-effective health approach. Now, only small amounts of drugs are decriminalized at this point, such as 1 gram of heroin or MDMA, 2 grams of coke or methamphetamine, 12 grams of psilocybin mushrooms, and 40 doses of LSD, oxycodone, or methadone. That seems like a lot, but Anyway, criminal penalties for possession of these amounts are replaced with a fine of up to $100, which can be waived if the user is evaluated at addiction recovery centers. Okay. Other states like Arizona and Montana, New Jersey, and South Dakota approved measures to legalize recreational marijuana use. South Dakota is kind of a surprise to me since they just rejected that 4 years ago, and they seem to be an otherwise conservative state. Now, the libertarian streak in me, all for it, but the former police officer in me is filled with some apprehension that this is going to be a very bad idea. A number of district attorneys in Oregon have said that this plan recklessly decriminalizes possession of the most dangerous types of drugs and will lead to an increase in acceptability of dangerous drugs. My thoughts exactly. However, they cite European countries like Portugal, where they have decriminalized these drugs, and claim that it has had no negative effects. Now, I have a hard time believing that. I'd like to see some data supporting that claim. A cursory looks, it kind of does. But I guess we'll get more in Oregon when this measure goes into effect. I want to talk about racism in this election. And I've been called a self-hating black man, a sorry excuse for a black man for supporting a guy who espouses white supremacy, blah, blah, blah. And I got into it with a couple of people on social media with this, and of course, neither of them presented any argument other than a lot of emotional caps lock and exclamation point rhetoric, but not a shred of evidence to support such stupidity. And I try not to describe people that way, but listen to this exchange. And this is due to the fact that I called Kamala Harris a communist, and you'll see the relevance here in a second. So this person says, "The self-hate us real." And I respond, "And you're basing this brilliant assessment of my character based on what exactly?" And this person responds, "Base it on the fact that you forget you're black. Voting and supporting someone who promotes white supremacy and racism, and the fact that you call a brilliant, educated black woman a communist." This person knows nothing about politics that isn't based on race. They think, and I'm using that term very loosely in this instance, that calling someone a communist is somehow an indictment of their education, and the fact that she's black or claims to be black, she's not, precludes her from being a communist. And of course, I had to bring up how she got her start in politics later on in that exchange, and just as obviously, I got no response on that. The other one was from some guy who defriended me years ago, probably during the 2016 election, and he jumped on some comments I made and berated me for something I said. And again, I hate myself and forgot where I came from, blah, blah, blah. And this from a guy who, in his profile, said that he doesn't discuss politics on social media. But it's not just these geniuses on my feed, but celebrities are getting in on it as well. Janelle Monáe, in a now deleted tweet, said, "F Donald Trump and every American citizen, celebrity, white woman, black man, etc. who supported him. Burn." Okay, I thought the left was supposed to be the tolerant ones. I thought they were supposed to be the ones that wanted unity, and it was Republicans that sought to divide us by telling half the country, 70 million people, that you want them to burn. Doesn't sound very unifying. But it doesn't end there, because she sent another now deleted tweet. She shared a tweet, she reposted a tweet to someone who said, "I'm never forgiving Trump voters, and that doesn't make me a bad person." And her response was, "Never, or those who endorsed him." Sounds like her Trump derangement syndrome is in full effect. And of course, not to be outdone, not to let her own Trump derangement syndrome go unnoticed, the predator, Maxine Waters. Was that uncalled for? Perhaps. I don't care though. You saw that meme, right? Anyway, I can't take credit for this one, but I can't unsee it now. Anyway, listen to what crazy Auntie Max had to say about black men who support Trump.
He's not going to sign a darn thing to them. He's a racist. He does not have any appreciation for black people and black women in particular. He's talked about us so bad. He has no respect for us. He's not doing anything for us. And for those black young men who think somehow they can align themselves with Trump, not only are they terribly mistaken, any of them showing their face, I will never, ever forgive them for undermining the possibility to help their own people and their own communities. It's absolutely unconscionable. It is shameful.
What is it about Donald Trump that has people so riled up? I know they think he's a racist, but he gets them so out of sorts that they just can't do anything but spew a bunch of rhetoric that has no factual basis. Their argument is the equivalent of a Facebook post with caps lock, exclamation points, and emojis. It looks like something at first glance, but even a cursory examination shows that there is nothing there, just tedious, insipid prattle. And the racism we're seeing is not coming from or endorsed by or incited by President Trump. I defy anyone to present evidence that he's a racist. I'll wait. But in the meantime, let's get the facts right. Even if you think that there was evidence before he came down the escalator that he was a racist, no one ever brought it up. He had his picture taken at events with Al Sharpton, as big a race hustler as ever lived. Jesse Jackson, Rosa Parks, Mike Tyson, all at different functions. A true racist would have avoided that at all costs. Here's how a true racist interacts with a black person.
All right. Senator Northam, thank you very much. Mr. Jackson, we appreciate you both being here.
Appreciate it.
As I said, this is the last opportunity for our viewers and the voters to see the two candidates side by side. We appreciate you making time for us live.
That was Virginia Governor Ralph Northam refusing to shake my dad's hand while they were doing an appearance during the lieutenant governor's race back in 2013. That kind of puts his Klan robe costume in a new perspective, doesn't it? But crazy Auntie Max said that he wouldn't do anything for the black community. Well, let's examine that. President Trump saw black unemployment decline to its lowest level ever recorded since they started keeping track of it. President Trump signed the First Step Act into law. Now, there are things about that I don't agree with, but many in the black community thought that was a great thing and appreciated it. He signed a bill for permanent funding for HBCUs. Historically black colleges and universities used to have to come to the government every year to ask for funding, and the president signed a bill into law that makes that unnecessary. Such a racist. That's such a racist thing to do, right? I mean, if this is how a racist president behaves, never mind. I'm not even going to finish that. I'm just going to say that if President Trump is a racist, he's doing it all wrong. All wrong. All right, let's get you out of here with some epic stupidity. Actually, before we do that, I want to address some of the stupidity that I've encountered on social media again. The people who have been railing for 4 years about Orange Man bad, and how divisive he is, and how his supporters are all either racist or hate themselves if they're not white because they support President Trump. They're in full gloat mode right now. But they prove with their ridiculousness that they just don't understand us. And it's not that difficult. So either they're too dumb to figure it out, or they don't even bother to try. And I think there's some of both going on. They think we're over here crying and going ape shit and rioting and looting, and that we're afraid of a black female being president. No, that's not it. That's their projection again. We just don't want a communist owned by China in the White House. But we're not going to act like children. We have jobs. We have families to take care of. We have work to do to make sure that Kamala is a one-term president, if they prevail in court, that is, because it's not over. So For any leftists listening, if Biden does end up winning in court, life will go on. We will move on and we will be fine. We will be poorer in 4 years than we are now, but we'll be fine. But anyway, let's get you out of here. First, Keith Olbermann is at it again. He sent out a tweet saying, Trump must be removed and arrested tonight, gripped by a paranoid delusion, threatening the nation's safety. This can't wait any longer. And accompanying that tweet was this.
President Karen is now yelling at the manager, demanding to see the manager's manager. But President Karen has continued to mismanage his own coup. Trump can still live in a version of the bubble that he and the 69 million morons who voted for him have lived in since 2015. Inside Trump world, it's fun and exciting, and there's no pandemic and nothing but white people and lots of guns, and everybody will be a billionaire soon. We have not had a lot of political exiles in this country, but Trump and his people will form their own grudge-driven alt-government. Biden's lying, Biden's Chinese, Biden's a robot, and their vendetta fuel will be limitless.
The guy is beyond batshit crazy. And the fact that this election was close means to Joy Reid that the country's racist.
Even though we knew the red wave was a thing, and then the red mirage, I should say, the red mirage, we all knew it was coming. But when you're right, in the moment, it's enervating. It's aggravating. And I think partly, and I said this last night, I do think it's because we've been reporting for 5 years, Rachel, about Russia, about national security, just undermining our national security, the impeachment, the racism, the Nazis, all of it. And then COVID laying on top of it felt like a repudiation was coming. Sure. And I think even though we intellectually understand what America is at its base, right, that there is a great amount of racism, anti-blackness, anti-wokeness, this idea that political correctness is some sort of scheme to destroy white America, right? Like, we know what this country is, but you still, part of you, I think part of your heart says, you know what, maybe the country is going to pay off all of this pain. As the night wore on, and I realized, and it sunk in, okay, that's not happening. We are still who we thought. It's disappointing.
It couldn't possibly be that Biden and Harris were terrible candidates. So while Trump wasn't palatable to a lot of people, they still saw the good he did, and enough of those people made it a close vote. Or it could be straight voter fraud, who knows? But this right here is just a sad display.
It's easier to be a parent this morning. It's easier to be a dad. It's easier to tell your kids character matters. It matters. Tell them the truth matters. Being a good person matters. And it's easier for a whole lot of people. If you're Muslim in this country, you don't have to worry if the president doesn't want you here. If you're an immigrant, you don't have to worry if the president's going to be happier to have babies snatched away or send dreamers back for no reason. It's a vindication for a lot of people who have really suffered. The I can't breathe. That wasn't just George Floyd. That was a lot of people that felt that they couldn't breathe.
I am pulling this guy's man card right here and right now. There are acceptable times for men to cry. The birth of a child, and as sad as it is to contemplate the death of a child, the death of a parent or spouse, and possibly your daughter's wedding. Your candidate winning election or being projected to win an election is not one of those times. Especially when you have admitted on a number of occasions that the other guy did a lot of good things. So crying when the guy who you had good things to say about loses does not qualify as a tearjerker. Get it together, man. And he talked about his son there. I hope his son sees that at some point and gives him shit for it, because it was pathetic. Well, folks, that's it for this week. I'll try to do better the next time, but thank you for watching and listening. If you're watching on Rumble, please take a second to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. If you're listening to the audio only, thank you, and please subscribe and leave us a review. I would really appreciate it. Our website is thelibertycast.net. Go to the podcast page and you'll find all the latest podcasts as well as the show notes. And we're also on the rightway.site. And of course, you can find us on social media as well. Parler, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Liberty Cast on all 4 platforms. So again, thanks for checking us out. And until next time, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody.